Everybody please rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Martin? Here. Mayor, Mr. Nutter?
Here.
Mayor Samaras?
Here.
Mr. Dakota?
Here.
Ms. Doherty? Mr. Hoey?
Here.
Mr. Lay?
Here.
6 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Before we begin, I think we have someone to welcome to meetings. Sarah Gare. Sarah, welcome to Lowell. You're
Hi.
representing Lowell High School, and welcome to these meetings.
Yes, I'm 2019 senator of my senior class. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, we're glad to have you here. Thank you. All right, next I need a motion to accept and place on file the September 5th and the September 12th minutes of the Lowell School Committees. I need a motion by Ms. Martin, second by Mr. Dakota. Thank you. All right, next we have, we also have approval of the special meeting minutes. Oh, we did that one. Okay, thank you. I gotta get my reading glasses. I borrowed these from somebody else. Okay, we now have permission to enter. Superintendent, do you have any issues here?
I would ask Ms. Turner if she can just share with you. These are all reposting of renewals of contracts that we have had with grants and something that is an annual event that we do. One of them is specifically tied, several of them are specifically tied to the full-service community schools grant, UMass Lowell, the Project Learn, Christ Jubilee, the Green Dragons, Community Teamwork, Mill City Grows. Those are all part of the community service grant, and the others are renewals.
Any questions? All right, I need a motion to approve permission to enter by Mr. Nutter, seconded by Mr. Dakota. Thank you. Roll call.
Ms. Martin? Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty? Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
6 yeas, 1 present. Approved.
Okay.
1 absent, I'm sorry. Approved.
Actually, she yelled it in from the hallway. Welcome. All right, next we have memorial for Anthony Sties, father of Jennifer McChrystal, Special Education Director. Please dim the lights. Thank you. Next, we have motions. The first motion is by Mr. Nutter. Requests Mayor to direct City Auditor to provide copies of all correspondence between his office and the school department regarding the 2018 fiscal year relating to transfers, issues with invoices, overpayments, items he rejected, and how and why he accepted the fiscal 2018 budget without a vote of the school committee authorizing it. Need a motion to accept? By Ms. Doherty, second by Ms. Martin. Mr. Nutter?
Thank you. Again, we know we had several issues. We know of the principal contract that we had to approve, and we know of some other, and it was watching the city council meeting a couple of weeks ago that got me to thinking that, we need to document everything because of the fiscal chaos that we're in. So I just want to put this forward and make sure that we have all the documentation.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Mr. Hoey?
I'm not in favor, Mayor, but I'd like to speak on the motion.
Sure.
To my colleague, the maker of the motion, when I read this motion, I try to figure out to myself, tried to come up with one word that would describe this motion if I was a blogger. And I'm not a blogger, but the word would be, it's basically hogwash as far as I'm concerned. If you remember not too long ago that Finance Subcommittee, and we can find the tapes, I'm pretty sure that Mr. Nutter stated in this chambers that he was about to fire the superintendent, maybe not in those words, but when he mentioned that, he wanted to hear from some people from the Department of Revenue or whatever, and I remember him correcting himself, saying that the superintendent on this particular issue didn't make a mistake. He might have even saved the school committee. He might have saved us from looking bad. What he did was legal. I thought Mr. Nutter even said that he was satisfied at the time. So when I read this motion tonight, I'm just wondering, why are we beating a dead horse? Why is this in front of me again? That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Nutter?
Thank you. Having been on the committee a short time, when I discovered that the school committee did not do their job and approve a budget, and that you cannot submit a budget that is higher than what the city manager has authorized and the council had voted on, in an attempt to try to not embarrass members of that school committee, including Mr. Hoey, I backed off a little bit instead of going full bore and just highlight the fact that they did not do what is their basic core job. But we do know since then that we've had several other issues with budgeting, as far as, again, we had to approve paying $6,000 to a principal, and we were giving a thing that he was a construction person, and I told you our facilities coordinator and the city DPW department were way upset over allegations that a principal would do their job better than they do their job. So there are a lot of other financial issues that we've found out since February, and that's why I want it documented.
Mr. Lane?
If that case to you, Mr. Mayor, so what is the purpose of gathering this information now? I just want to see the real reason why at this time that you want to get this information.
Mr. Lay, you want Mr. Nutter to respond?
Yeah.
Mr. Nutter, you care to respond?
I read in the newspaper a quote from the mayor that we may be meeting with the former superintendent. We have an obligation to present all of the facts for our reason for terminating him. I thought it was very vocal that night in explaining my fiscal concerns. And this information that I'm asking for is just to strengthen and showcase the fiscal concerns I had that night, I had when I ran for this office, and I continue to have to this day because of the situation we're financially in, because of the mismanagement of the budget by the last administration. So that's why I'm asking for it now. I want to make sure we have all our information that we need to justify our actions.
Mr. Hoey, but the thing is...
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I'm going to keep it short.
I understand, but at this point, I don't want to debate, but I'll allow you to speak, but the thing is, we'll just vote, we'll take a roll call on the motion.
Right, but I believe we can speak twice on a motion, and I'm going to try to be very nice. But what I read when I see in this motion, and I think if I'm correct, back when this happened and the school committee made a total big mistake here, that we were over budget, I believe. It was something about we were predicting what the Senate was going to give us. It was like 600,000, then there was like another 200 and something thousand. And the superintendent seeing that, hey, you can't go in with a budget higher, but he can go with a budget lower. He can do that. And I think legally he can do that. And that's why I'm going to vote against this. I thought this should be gone, but But here it is, it's in front of us again. I don't believe the school committee made such a big deal. If we did, we would have found out now, by now. And I'm even hearing, all the time I hear that we had 3 budgets that were surplus. So I really don't know what we're looking for with that motion, other than maybe trying to make someone look bad when they shouldn't be looking that bad, so.
No, the thing
I
is...
have no more to say.
All right,
Thank you.
But I think the school committee, or any member of the school committee has a right to raise questions, to ask for information. The way I look at this is asking for information. The city auditor has to provide that type of information, and the information he provides, are the procedures correct? There's the balance of money, that's sometimes the issue, but process is also the issue. So, Ms. Doherty, but the thing is, I just soon end this and just have a roll call.
Actually, I just want to ask, why not get all the facts? I think that my colleagues to the left have mentioned 1 or 2 issues, when really we have many issues that we're dealing with regarding the budget and discrepancies with the budget. And, you know, I'm thinking about that state money that we have to pay back to the tune of over $2 million. So my question is, why not get the facts? And that's what this motion is asking for. Give us the facts.
I'd like to end this debate and go, it's a request for information. People vote their conscience. Roll call.
Ms. Martin? Yes. Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
No.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
No,
Mr. Lay?
No.
4 yeas, 3 nays, motion passes.
Thank you. Next motion by Mr. Nutter. School committee administration consider creating a subcommittee that includes health professionals, principals, school committee, representatives, city DPW, Mr. Underwood, and UTL, SA clerk representation to look at creating a policy to deal with temperature and heat index issues. I need a second on that motion by Ms. Martin. Mr. Nutter.
We had a facility subcommittee meeting last week, and we're going to be meeting with the city council, I believe, on the 9th. But one of the issues that, you know, again, watching the city council meeting, when they were talking about some of the issues they had with voting machines, and councilors were concerned that, you know, that they were in a building that was so hot. Well, you know what? Our kids are in the same buildings that are so hot. And as Mr. Georges, and Mr. Georges and I may not agree on a lot of things, but as Mr. Georges stated last week, we need to look at air quality and temperatures of these buildings and the health of our staff and our students. And so I'm just proposing that, you know, we get together and form a subcommittee and have all the stakeholders listed, not just the UTL, but the, you know, principals and somebody from the school committee and the DPW and a health professional, because there's all sorts of, you know, health issues with asthma and other conditions, and we look to see, you know, what we need to do. I mean, I know they have readings of some of these classrooms being in the high 80s, and yet it astounds me and kind of infuriates me, to be honest with you, that, you know, counselors were, you know, trying to defend the city because the machines may have overheated, and yet had they done maintenance to the buildings the past 20 years like they should have, we may not have this problem. So I was a little angry at listening to that conversation. So I think it's important that, you know, we look out for our kids and our students and our staff.
Right.
Thank you.
Some of your dialogue will say separate issues, but the thing is, for clarification, are you looking to develop a policy that when rooms will say reach a certain temperature or something, things like that?
We may.
In other words, to assist the superintendent in making decisions as to whether buildings should be closed or not?
That may be what that subcommittee as a group decides, that, you know, based on some health professionals, we may need to say when a building reaches a certain temperature, we need to have early dismissals or half days or something.
Okay, Ms. Martin, then Mr. Hoey.
Thank you very much. I support this effort, and I think it's a great idea to have this kind of broad participation. I would say, I don't believe we can call it a subcommittee, because it's not a subgroup of the school committee. I think task force is the right term that we'd want to use. And I would also recommend, if the maker of the motion is amenable, to put a date on it, to put a deadline, that we'd be hoping to get a report, and I'd defer to the administration to give us a sense of when they think is reasonable, whether it's for the beginning of the year, January, or what you feel would be, give you guys, your team time to participate in it, but to ensure that we have kind of a date when we can expect it back.
No, I think that's the better approach. I was going to ask, if you create a subcommittee, it would be a sunset subcommittee that wouldn't continue on, because it's a
Or a
particular
task
issue.
force, as Ms. Martin
Task
mentioned.
force.
Sure, absolutely.
Mr. Hoey, you had,
Yeah, just, the only problem I have is, I don't have a problem trying to find out, do we have a policy? I'd like to know if we have a policy on heat, like state and federal guidelines, because I think, if I remember correctly, and I was on the policy subcommittee, even though I'm glad Jerry has that now, I always thought, like, if it was 90 degrees outside, it has to be 80 degrees inside a building. I just thought that's what I remember from policies before. And in some of our buildings, it'll be 90 degrees outside and 107 inside. So there's no doubt I want to look into it to see if there's a policy to make sure, because common sense should tell some teachers to get out of that classroom on their own, and I've said that before too. But if we have to have a policy set on it, I'm for that. So I'll support this motion, but I'm just concerned about giving principals more work to do. I think they have enough, and we should be the one that comes up with the policy, that's all.
well,
I think it's a good idea.
I think to get input is a good thing, but Mr. Dakota?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is actually a more pressing issue. I think we have to push this date as close as possible. Cold weather is coming soon, so I think we need to...
Actually, so you were heat, weather, the temperature, hot or cold?
Hot or cold, both. So I think we need to address that sooner rather than later. Thank you.
You want to add that to your motion?
Sure. So we'll make the motion to form a task force to discuss temperature issues.
Okay.
How's that?
Okay. And second by Ms. Martin. Any further discussion? Yes, Sarah.
I would just like to add my opinion. On the first week of school this year, we had 3 half-days concerning overheating in the school. It was pretty unbearable, so I actually encourage this policy being made. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next, another motion by Mr. Nutter. School Committee Administration consider eliminating February, April vacation beginning in the 2019-2020 school year, creating 1 vacation week in March. A second? By Ms. Martin.
Thank you. I know this probably wasn't going to be a very well-received motion, and to be honest, I worked at the Greater Lowell Regional for 3.5 years, so I know how important some people feel these vacation times are. But we keep getting into issues with severe winters and heating and all these other issues. Basically, what we lose by doing this is, or what we gain, is we gain 3 additional days. The students only lose, or the staff, 2 days. You would still get President's Day off. You would still get Patriots' Day off. And so we would have then 5 days off. So you're really only losing 3 days, but it gives us 3 additional days. So students could get out earlier in June and have a longer summer, and staff, because we start before Labor Day. And, even the Department of Education on their website, has this as a suggestion when you're doing your 180 days. And, Mr. Georges reminds us on many occasions that the teachers, their salary is based on 180 or 181 days. It's not defined by, saying that they have to have an April and February vacation. In fact, if you listen to Paul, teachers don't really get paid for vacation days because that's not part of the 180 days their contract is based on. So I think that it's time that we looked at the way we do things and maybe change it up a little, get the kids out of school when the hot weather, starts in June, and get them out in an earlier time, and have 1 week in March. And it's at least something worth looking into and talking about. Thank you.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Again, I think that this is a very timely motion, and I do think it's something we could be considering. I also think we should be looking at some other options, and I would, again, look for the administration, and I know Desi has had other conversations about this as well. Are there opportunities for, I know I'm going to be wicked popular, but a longer day? Can we accommodate things that way? I mean, I think we're going to need to get creative, because I think the reality is that our school year is becoming more and more of a problem at the beginning and the end, and that the heat issues, all these different things, storms in the winter are getting more intense. I think the recognition is that this is, that there's an impact to the way we schedule our time, that based on current weather patterns and what we can probably anticipate in the future, we're going to need to start making some changes. I appreciate it, and I thought it was absolutely the right decision to go to the half-days that first week, because it was miserable everywhere. But I mean, that really is shortchanging our students. I know we don't get charged for it because a half-day still counts as one of our 181. I think that's a little cute. And I just think over time, we need to be a little more proactive about developing a schedule that will allow our students to have the time on task, our staff. And again, in terms of being timely, I think we need to be getting this information very quickly, because everyone is making plans, whether it's families, staff, all across the board. Any changes we want to make, we are going to need to be able to announce early, as soon as possible, just to have, to be fair to everyone who will be impacted by it. But I'd look forward to getting the information.
Thank you. Mr. Dakota?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to address the lengthening the day. Having been a teacher for as long as I was, I have to say that by the last period of the day, kids are toast. If you're going to try to extend that day, they're going to be burnt toast. Just saying. I think extending the day is not a great idea. Really, it's never had traction in my book, but some people think it's a great idea. Some people think Saturday is a great idea, and I don't think that either. I think everybody needs that unwind time, kids and teachers, so I'm not sure I'd be supporting a longer school day. Thank you.
Okay, but that's just, Ms. Martin?
I just want to be clear. I'm not extending time. I'm talking about a longer school day that would then allow us to eliminate days, that it's not an increase in time. Well, it's an increase in time per day, but it wouldn't be over the 181 as they exist now. And I understand your point, having run school-age programs and getting the kids as they get off the bus. I understand where they're at. But I offered as an option because I think we're going to have to really consider everything if we're going to really be able to make some kind of substantive change that really will improve the educational opportunities overall. But I take your point.
Mr. Hoey?
Thanks, Mayor. I have a lot of things I'd like to say, but I'll cut out about 3 of them and just come down to my main concern, which would be the children and the teachers and support staff getting proper time off. That's very important to me. I also think, and just my opinion, that children need more time with their family. But what I would like to ask the superintendent to do for me, so I could vote on this either way, I think it's a great motion because it's going to get us to talk about it. But I'd like you to investigate, the opinions of all our teachers and all our support staff and see what their opinion is on this. Because to eliminate a couple of, in my family, my wife, a lot of people are for this, to change those vacations. But I have concerns about children might be stressed out, might need time off. This is a different world than I remember 20 years ago. So this is a big issue and a great motion, Mr. Nutter. I think the discussions will get much bigger, and we probably need to go to a subcommittee or something else to talk about it, because I think there's a lot of things to say. Thank you very much.
Madam Superintendent?
we were thinking along the same line. I had already jotted down survey staff. So I think that's a really critical piece when it comes to the vacation time as well as the extended day. At the end of the school year, if committee members recollect, we had surveyed staff because of so many snow days that we had. And we did have a great preponderance of the staff. I think it was over 84% of the staff that were willing to extend the day for a short portion of time to be able to make up a couple of days. In addition, the families were willing. Our challenge was the LRTA wasn't able to amend, perhaps given some extension of time, there might be they might be amendable to that. So it's certainly worth looking into.
Yes, Mr. Dakota?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In that period, was there an inquiry into, would we be allowed to do that, to extend the day to make up that time?
Yes, we were allowed to make up the time by extending the day.
Okay, thank you.
But as the superintendent did raise the issue, it's just not a simple move because we have busing to consider so many other issues. I'm from a school of where the February vacation, the April vacation, the March vacation, these various vacations, I mean, it's like a period of time. The children and teachers all need a rest at some point. And there were studies that would indicate that the reason for the vacations or the vacations really were worthwhile. But life has changed. The weather's changed. The issues that happened in Lawrence, in Andover, and North Andover. And there are so many intangibles that we deal with today that I think the time has come where we look at how we run our schools and how we can make up time and how we can deal with many of these situations. So it's a little research, but I think it's well worth it. Mr. Lay?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, when I saw this motion, I wanted to hear the opinion from teachers and educators. I think they probably have the best answers. Some really against the motion. Some stay neutral, make no difference, don't want to stand either way. But one concern, one teacher raised a concern about the long stretch of preparation for MCAS, which the April vacation is just 1 week right before the MCAS. So that may be something that they need a break on before they go ahead and take the MCAS. So something like that, I like Mr. Hoey said, I trust superintendent and her staff to have the best answer for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? All right. Next, another motion by Mr. Nutter. Request padding is added to the walls of the Bailey School gym for student safety. Second on that motion? By Mr. Hoey, Mr. Nutter?
This came as a request from 3 different parents. Apparently, at one time, I think the padding used to be up. I know at the McAuliffe and the Robinson and a lot of other schools, there's padding, especially under the baskets where the kids, playing basketball run into the wall. And one parent told me about a kid who actually cracked their head last year. So they're just concerned for their safety. It seemed to be a simple motion. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, next motion also by Mr. Nutter. Request administration report how teacher, classroom, donated technology, Kindle pads, laptops can be granted access to the school network. Need a second? By Mr. Dakota? Mr. Nutter?
Again, this came through email from both some parents and a teacher who said, gee, I got a couple of Kindles and, I have some students who could really use some additional help, but we can't get it on the network. And I've heard from a couple of parents too that, they're trying to get donations, but they keep hearing that there's having a difficult time getting it connected to the network. And I understand network security and all that, but I don't know if there's any way we can look into it and see what needs to be done to get this. If we're going out and teachers and principals are getting the equipment, we need to find a way to use it.
Okay. Mr. Hoey, then Mr. Nutter?
Yes, Mayor, we have someone here tonight from the high-tech place, right? The tech. I have some concerns with it a little bit because of, obviously, I think there'll be some cost and security, like Jerry said. And then my opinion about it would be if, when I read it, I wasn't sure if it was about letting people have access or bringing their own computers in, but obviously that's what it is, right?
These teachers and parents explain that they've gone out and they've requested donations, and they've gotten people to donate to the school Kindles or laptops, and it's just getting them to be able to access the network.
So what I think on that, Mayor, is I would think the principal should have that call, meaning if a teacher wanted to bring in some computers or anything into his school, then he gets in touch with the superintendent and said, I have Miss Doherty that wants to bring in a few, is that okay? And we kind of approve it that way, because I think it could get out of control and have a lot of cost to it, that's all I'm saying. And security problems, it could have that too. And I don't know much about high-tech. I like Siri, I like to talk to her, she's the one that gave me that word, hogwash. So, in this thing here, I'm just learning how to really use it, but I just feel with people bringing in their own stuff that we could have some security problems. My wife worked for IBM for years, and she thinks there could be some cost to this. So would you like to address this a little bit tonight? Or whoever it is that's in charge. I know they're here, so
But I think what we should do is really allow this to be looked at. I mean,
Okay.
you raised,
Yeah.
the issues you raised are important, but that's,
Okay, so they'll be coming back with some
Correct.
type of report for us?
yes.
Beautiful, thank you.
Mr. Dakota? Yeah. No, that's what we have to do. All right, thank you. All in favor? Ms. Martin?
Certainly in favor, but just as we're having this conversation, again, kind of a BYOD conversation in general about people being able to bring their own device. This had been a topic we discussed before, so I think it probably just fell off our radar screen, but we were talking about putting in place that kind of a policy and a model. So if we can just kind of look at it in that larger sense, if we're going to investigate, let's investigate, the full access.
Okay, thank you. Next, motion by Ms. Doherty, request the mayor have the city provide the school committee with a breakdown of PEG monies being used for educational purposes and revisit the issue of funding staff for the Lowell educational TV programs at Lowell High School. In addition, request the superintendent or her designee meet with LTC to explore a possible collaboration between the two entities and report findings, suggestions back to the committee. A second on that motion?
Second.
By Mr. Nutter? Okay, Ms. Doherty.
Thank you, Ron. I think the motion pretty much speaks for itself, but I want to say that from the get-go, my intention is to get Lowell Educational TV back. That we, as my colleagues may recall, whether it was misunderstanding, miscommunication, but during our budget hearing, we were given the impression, I think the Mayor mentioned it, as well as our former superintendent, that the city was going to increase their donation in order to provide the funding for these two staff members, which was 50% of the people associated with the television studio. That funding has not come through, so we're looking at millions of dollars of equipment over there and without having the staff. And not to mention the service it provides, not only to the schools, but to the whole community, and the students who get involved. And, I know, I came up through the Citywide Parent Council. They used to broadcast all our meetings. I mean, it's a real loss for this district. And I don't want to just sit back and let it go without, let's look at, first of all, the funding itself. How is the PEG monies being used? Because my understanding is the city receives 5% from Comcast, which equals about $300,000 each percent. 2% of that goes to LTC. I have no qualms with that at all. I think they do a fantastic job at LTC. We don't even get 1%. We're getting $108,000, 1%. Give us 1%. That'll pay for those two other people. We can get our studio back. So I'm asking for the city to explain how they're using that money, how it's being used for educational purposes, which I believe is the intent of it. And then the second half really speaks to the administration whether we had the funding or not, I think we should be collaborating more with LTC. I think they've got a lot of the digital equipment that we don't have. We have not been able to keep up with the technology. And I think there could be a lot of sharing of resources, and we could work better. We're better and stronger together whenever we do that. So there's really two parts to it, and that's my intention with it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Mr. Hoey?
I might be the only person in here that watches Channel 22, but I do watch it. I've seen things like the Bill of Rights, U.S. history. I mean, I've seen some nice things on it, and this, I'm just getting back to this motion. It's a no-brainer. I'm supporting you. So thanks for this motion.
Mr. Lay, you have a question?
Just want to say I support the motion. I think it's a great motion. So.
All in favor? Thank you. All right, next subcommittee report, the Joint Facilities and Ad Hoc Building Committee. Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Your Honor. We did meet, I believe I reported out on that meeting at our last special meeting last week, but I think there might have been one of the items we needed to vote on, the official naming of the day school. I think we did not actually vote on that. So I did report out, we had a discussion. The three items we discussed were the official naming of the day school, the custodial services, and the top 10 facilities report. The only outstanding motion from that subcommittee meeting to bring before this committee tonight is the naming of the day school. And we had some discussion about a prior school committee had made a commitment, and I told the report that we would name the next new building after a former superintendent, George Saras, who, as we all know, was a lion in terms of what he did for our schools, all the new buildings under his leadership. But this school is not a new building, and there was some very moving testimony from different staff people who had worked with Dr. Janice Ady, who formerly headed up the special education services, to name the day school after Dr. Ady. And I believe in the actual motion was made by Mr. Hoey, seconded by Mr. Nutter, to name the Lowell Day School the Dr. Janice Ady Day School. And so I would put that, and we...
I need that as a motion now.
And I put that to the full committee.
As a motion.
As a motion.
And seconded by Mr. Nutter. Yes, Mr. Nutter?
I just want to mention the administration on Monday, along with the Daily Group, had a kind of a soft grand opening because we hadn't officially named it, but they had literally a blue ribbon cutting of the facility out there. The facility is absolutely gorgeous. It is really what you'd like to see every one of our students be able to be in. Every classroom in there is not only immaculately clean, but the walls are brightly colored. There's a lot of direct sunlight, and the staff and the students are so proud of that building. Tonight there's a package going around of little thank you notes that the students made up to present to the school committee. And I had several parents come over and just thank us and tell us already, one parent in particular, the change in the whole environment and the behavior and the improvement of his student because of this school. So it was a great night. We have a great staff, and it's a great location. We should be very proud of that building.
Okay. So we'll have a roll call on the naming.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
All right, and I just need a motion to accept this as a, report in progress by Ms. Doherty, seconded by Mr. Hoey. Thank you. Do we have?
Yeah, he's going to report out, I think.
Okay, next we have a policy subcommittee report from Mr. Nutter.
Before tonight's meeting, we had a policy subcommittee meeting regarding the email to Lowell School Committee. The LC address, Ms. Martin was present, and Mr. Hoey and Mr. Dakota were also in attendance. But the superintendent brought forward, there is a way we could, if we wanted to tried to copy or partake of what the city does, but Ms. Martin and I both felt that that was more of a form type thing where, you know, you really didn't get to answer it, and my motion really did not want to put any more work on the administration. I think that when people reach out to the school committee, they're reaching out to the people that they elected for these positions. There is no clear-cut motion in place right now or method in place to guarantee somebody would respond, but it's now, I guess it's going to be up to us as members of the school committee. You know, when we see that email, if we want to respond, if we want to forward it to the superintendent or proper staff, that's what we do. And, you know, I would just, you know, one of the things was we don't want to hit reply to all because we don't want to be accused of having any meetings, so you can't include every member. So I would just say, you know, I know having several parents, you know, reach out after I replied to some of them and said I would put a motion on the agenda. That's all it took. They were very happy that somebody got their email and somebody responded. And that's just up to us to do that. That's all.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right. I need a motion to accept this as a report of progress by Ms. Martin, seconded by Mr. Dakota. Thank you. All right, next we have reports of the superintendent. The first is the school calendar events. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is in response to Mr. Dakota's request at the last school committee meeting relative to a motion that had been previously on the report of motions, and he asked specifically about a school calendar with actually like a button on the home page that could be done. Mr. Overton, our district webmaster, responded to that report on March 21st, 2018. We've attached the school committee meeting minutes for that, but we also attached so that all committee members and members of the public know where to find that. It's right on the home page. There is a button that is just literally says calendars. And when you click on that button, it goes to all of our school calendars, and they're directly there for your access.
Any questions, Mr. Dakota?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is fabulous, by the way. I think it's terrific. But you can just go right to the school department website, and there it is. Like you said, dead center too. So it's really easy to find, and it opens right up to a page where all of the different schools, and that's exactly what I was hoping to get. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Next. Response to Ms. Martin's motion of February 6th, 2017 regarding the annual evaluation of teaching and administrative staff. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, thank you. There was a report that was prepared by Interim Human Resource Director Susan Mulligan on April 26, 2018. That is there for your review. Ms. Desmond can answer any questions that you might have relative to that. That's our last report, the 2015-16 and 2016-17 Educator Evaluation Performance Ratings for Lowell.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much. Are you saying it was presented to the school committee in April of 2018?
No, it wasn't. It was prepared by Ms. Mulligan, but it was never brought forward.
Okay. So I appreciate it being brought forward. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And this is exactly what I was looking for, you know, a year and a half, 2 years ago when I asked the question, so that's great. It's great to be able to track over 2 years. Do we have a sense of when we'd be able to look at, thank you, Rob, Ms. Desmond.
Yes, so this information in the end of July is a report that we have to upload through our TeachPoint database to the state website. That is compiled with the, I don't want to use acronyms because people will probably not know what I'm talking about, but the staff reporting data that we also have to provide the state. Once the state goes through that data, they then start to put together these analysis reports and they post them. So the school year 17-18 will be posted in a similar format, probably early spring. So somewhere, we expect around March. And when we have that information, we will put it with this information and start to keep a listing that compiles year to year so that we can present it in addition to this data next spring for you.
I appreciate that, and I think being able to track it this way is really incredibly helpful. I think that, you know, it's encouraging to see that with teachers' non-professional status, meaning our newer teachers, have a very high percentage, at least in 15, 16. So I'm hoping in the next round, 17, 18, we'll see that go back up again. And I know that these are 2-year cycles, so I'm sure there's some variation in that. But what I really was paying particular attention to was this, it's a very small percentage of the unsatisfactory teachers, I mean, all less than a point. So, I mean, that's, I think, very encouraging for our district. But not a lot of movement in that area, so something that I think that we might want to, you know, again, as we track this over time, absolutely.
Dennis?
So last year and this year, we're continuing the work with evaluations, trying to, especially this year, looking at calibrating across the board so that when a principal in one school and a principal in another school or assistant in another school does an evaluation, that we're all using kind of the same lens. So that's a bulk of the work this year with our leaders during our monthly sessions.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you, and I think that's incredibly valuable. Having the appropriate rubric for everyone, I think, makes it's exactly the way this should work. And I look at that, again, admittedly, very small percentage. It's where we can see the most growth. It's where investing in professional development and whether it's mentoring or a lot of other supports that we can offer to teachers, that's where we can really make some gains. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Thank you. Next, Coordinated Program Review Report. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you. If you can recall, in May of 2017, we submitted a very, very substantial report, binders and binders and binders of uploads to the state relative to the Coordinated Program Review. Since such time, we have received our final report, and that's what's attached for your consideration. The recommendations are in special education, civil rights, English learner education, and college and career, our Perkins grant. So when we looked at it, I think it's important for the committee, because it is an extensive report and you're just seeing the findings. I think it's important for the committee to know that there were over 126 indicators that we were assessed on. And in 2012, when the last review took place, for our civil rights, out of the indicators that were civil rights, we had 12 areas that we were cited on. In 2018, this year, we were cited in 3 areas. And there are areas that we're already doing a corrective, three. So in 2012 for special education, we had 26 areas that we were cited on. And in 2018, we were doing a dance. There were 3 areas that we were cited on. ELL, in 2012, again, there were 13 areas we were cited on, and in 2018, there were 3 areas. And also, I don't have the specifics on the Perkins, the career pathway, but we were cited. This is one of the areas where we really have to look at. This is the high school career grants pathways that we have. We have 12 areas that we're cited on, and we're already working with the high school team on those corrective action plans. So the first week in October, we are to submit our corrective action plans. Ms. Desmond and a whole team, and along with Mr. McCosker, met with the state this week and went over what we need to do to make those plans. We've actually already done a lot of work, so we're really pleased that we're going to be able to meet that deadline and get those areas addressed.
Any further discussion? Mr. Hoey?
Yeah, I went through this once. I need to go through this again, and I mean, you can look at it in all kinds of ways, but to me, special ed, I think we need to have a subcommittee and deal with these issues, because I believe we're in trouble with money, and I believe we're going to have some more trouble with some finances when it comes to special ed, once you read through it once. But I have some real concerns about the special education also. So I think we need a subcommittee for them to go over this whole thing with us. I think that'd be a good idea. That's all.
Doherty?
I was thinking the same thing, and actually I was thinking about the reports coming a little further, Ms. Desmond's report about the report cards. I'm just not sure where this is comprehensive, what subcommittee would be the best place, because one of the things that jumped out to me, I know we have invested so much in our bully intervention and prevention program, but yet, there's a number of things that the state says we're lacking.
It's one.
It's about professional development. Right. So, I mean, it does, I think, deserve a closer look. I'm just not sure what the body feels would be the best and most appropriate way to do that.
I think these, sorry, Mr. Mayor, based on, like Mr. Hoey pointed out, a lot of the issues are with the special education. So I think the special education subcommittee would be a good place for at least to start with this.
If I could just add to that, there were some issues with special ed, but most of the issues were with the career path at the high school.
The career path.
So maybe
that
was
was the.
Guys, I don't want to have a discussion.
But I think that was, if you were going to break it into pieces, it goes in different places. But the one that jumps out to me as the biggest was not, special ed showed a great deal of movement, as the superintendent pointed out. The last time we had, I forget what you said, 12? And now we have 3.
The last time we had 26.
26, and now we have, so we've made great strides in special ed, whereas the career path, we had 12. So, I mean,
Madam
I'm open to what you guys think.
Madam Superintendent, do you want to make a remark?
No, I just, that the overall, the areas that we're cited on are areas that we can address fairly easily. We already have plans in place to do that. With the exception of our ELL, we know that we need additional staff to be able to support our students. So I'm certainly willing to have a joint committee if you so wish. The ELL would fall under the curriculum, as would the career would fall under Lowell High School, special ed and civil rights. Well, we can.
Mr. Doherty, then Mr.
I apologize. I just had another idea. I'm wondering if it would be better if we just have the subcommittee or whatever format, we could do it to the whole committee. Once you're preparing your response for the state.
Right.
So why not just, have a presentation that you're already doing for the state for us about, this is how we're going to address the 12 issues with the career path. This is how, because you're already doing that work. We don't need to jump into it now. I mean, I'm open to that if my colleagues are comfortable with that, that we get a more in-depth look at the areas that the state has identified as problematic, once you've had a chance to come up with your plan of how we're going to address them. I would be comfortable with that and we could do it as the whole. Do a presentation to us here, I mean, if everyone's okay with that.
Okay. Mr. Hoey?
Yeah, and I don't want to be too long on this, Mayor, but the reason why I believe it should be special ed is we might be dancing because we have a lot of things we've solved, but personally, I know there's issues like some child might need a dyslexic person, but yet a principal will give them a volunteer that's 85 or 90 years old. I can take it personally, it's happened to me. So there's some big issues, and there's people that would get some school that might cost their $250,000, and people get that for them through politics. There's things we have to polish up in special ed. I believe that's where we need to fix first, and it's the last I have to say about it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Mr. Nutter?
So can we make a formal motion that the administration at the next school committee meeting, does that give you time, Superintendent, or you want it for the later meeting in October?
Would it be okay with the committee if we went to the last meeting in October? That would give us time to, we want to be able to prepare for the state, and then also prepare for you a coherent message around what our plans are.
So for the
Yes,
October 17th meeting.
All right, I need a second on that, Ms. Doherty. Okay.
Mayor,
you.
can I
Yes.
add one thing, and it's just, I want to thank you for allowing us to even talk about that issue, because I actually thought that was going to be swept right under the carpet tonight. So listen, thank you very much.
We don't do that. Thank you. All right, next, budget updates, Madam Superintendent.
Yes, I'd ask Assistant Superintendent Turner to share with you the latest budget updates.
Good evening. The Business Office has several updates to share with you this evening. The first is transportation bills. With transportation bills for special ed and homeless students, we need the Business Office to verify the listing of students so that we don't pay for kids that have left the district. Late last fiscal year, some of the Business Office support staff identified students that were no longer with Lowell Public Schools, and they adjusted the bill accordingly. They were instructed to pay the bills in full, despite the discrepancy that was caught. So when this was brought to our attention, we ended up investigating reviewing a full year of NRT bills, and I found $40,000 worth of mistakes. We're currently working with NRT and the other communities who are they're fiscally responsible for the students. We're working with them to adjust this now. In addition, we're going to further review all of the other vendors with transportation to make sure that we don't have other students that were inadvertently paid with Lowell Public School funds.
Mr. Nutter?
We have somewhere documented who said to pay these bills as is, so we know why these bills, we know who told them to pay them?
It would have had to be the previous CFO.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hoey?
I just have a question through you, Mayor, to the superintendent. Now that you're sitting there, and I'm glad you are, I'm glad you're there, if a vendor isn't paid, how would you find that out? How would you find that out as a superintendent?
If a vendor isn't paid, I'd find out from the vendor. But this is not the case that a vendor wasn't paid. A vendor was paid.
No, my question to you, though, is how would you find out if a vendor wasn't paid? You'd either have to find out, I would believe, through the vendor.
Mm-hmm, correct.
Financial people.
Or the finance people.
Or the city.
Mm-hmm.
Tell you.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, in response to the transportation bill issue, we have started meetings with special ed, other key departments, lawyers, district support specialists, technology, to develop a shared file that we can use together to avoid paying for homeless students, special ed, ESSER students in the future. We're going to have a verification system, so this does not happen again. The next item that I would like to share is actually Exhibit 1 in your packet. It's a snapshot of where we stand with circuit breaker and out of district. As explained briefly in a previous meeting, we feel as though this is an underfunded line item in the budget. When we took the above foundation cost for tuition as of June 30th, and you applied the 72% that we have historically received in recent years, the amount is less than the listed amount in the budget. We expected $4 million in the budget, but the actuals, when we rerun the numbers, are more like $3.7 million. I also met with the special ed director and other special ed staff to learn and recreate the special ed out-of-district budget. As we discussed briefly, we do have day students that are coming, students that are being brought back in district, which could show a savings. However, we did not consider in the budgeting process the 5% increase to tuition. We did not consider what the special ed department calls hovering students, students that you know about but that have not been fully counted. And
For their IEP, isn't it?
exactly, they're in the process. So with that said, we tried to rebuild or recreate a budget. We took the $12 million in actual cost from last year. We did the 5% increase. Then we tried to adjust for the students that were aging out and students that we had brought in district. With all of these changes, and again, we haven't had a chance to actually sit down and go over the full extent of all of the changes to date, but with all of those changes, the lower than expected revenue, the savings with day school students, the savings with aging out students, we still have a net shortage. And then when we add in all of the students that are currently on the list, we're looking at maybe $500,000 worth of shortfall for out-of-district tuition. And that is without adding a cushion for additional students that may come in through DCF and other placements. I don't feel like we can add more to this deficit with how things stand right now. So at this time, I'm going to continue to monitor it. I'm going to meet with them weekly or bi-weekly so that we can update the list together and I can understand the financial impact as we go and keep you updated. Any questions?
Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Your Honor. Through you to our CFO. So I'm wondering if we're looking at a $500,000 shortfall minimum, right? We also have spaces at the new day school. We have room for more students. We had counted on, I think it was an additional 7 than we got, right? So is there a possibility that some of those out-of-district expenses, those students could end up at the day school and that number might drop, or is that a totally different population that we're talking about?
So go ahead.
So we do have some updates relative to the students who have been coming in. I don't know if you'd like to hear that update from Ms. McChrystal, or would you be prepared to share those updates at this time? So we do have additional students that we moved back into the district.
Yes, so thank you, everybody. We've moved back so far 12 students this year from out of district into the day school. That was for the first day of school. We have 2 more students. We are targeting to have 14 students who will be moving for this year. They were out of district last year. They'll be at our day school. We've added another layer of support for our out-of-district coordinator who supervises and oversees cases for about 156 students. We are going to have our BCBAs and our school coordinators going out and doing observations and working with the out-of-district staff to really target who needs more intervention and who can possibly move back to ensure that all of our students are getting the very best education. We've also had 7 students who are in-district students that had one-to-ones and that are now at the day school without one-to-ones. So that was a reduction of 7 one-to-ones at that point. And as Ms. Turner said, we've been working very closely. We had 4 students move into the district this year with out-of-district plans, so we would have automatically had to place them out of district. Those students were placed at the LeBlanc. So we've done a lot of talking about there's savings that we don't necessarily see in the out-of-district budget, but it's savings because it would have gone up significantly. So we're going to be meeting every other week to talk about all of that and to really account for cost increases that come in during the year, all of those pieces that I had spoken to you about group homes, advisories, DCFs. We're keeping the administration up to date on all of our cases that we're working with DCF on and seeing, can we bus kids back, all of that. So we're really trying to bring students back, and we have 12 so far, and we anticipate 14 within the next few months.
So then, just to clarify, that number you gave us is the real number? There's no other opportunity to drop that number? It's 500,000?
That number does include all that she has discussed, but it's a moving target. It's always, we could have less students, we could have students moving out, we could find out that someone is a different community's fiscal responsibility, but then again, we could have 5 students move in next week. So it's something that we have to monitor closely and keep you, it's going to be something that we monitor so regularly that you could hear about it every month as an update.
Ms. Martin and Mr. Nutter.
Thank you. In terms of the kind of budgeting process, my understanding is that historically we have always, I mean, it's kind of expected that you're going to see an increase every year from all of our special ed vendors. So I know in the past that we've incorporated that in. So this year, this 5% that you've just now added in, that was not represented in our original budget. Okay, so do you know by chance what it was in the year before that?
The actual cost or the 5%?
What the percentage was that we had done?
5%. It was 5%.
So that's been pretty, that was my thought. It seemed.
I can't guarantee that for the last year, but I do know that in past years, they always did a 5% increase because that's your average tuition increase.
Because that sounded familiar to me, that was the number that we had always kind of just used as a placeholder more than anything. You can, because as you say, there's many, many moving parts in that. But so in our most recent budgeting process, for whatever reason, we just didn't do that 5% increase that we had normally done historically. Thank you.
Mr. Nutter?
Ms. McChrystal, how many total students do we now have at the day school?
Probably by the end of the week, we will have 46 students at the day school that would be otherwise placed out of district.
And you know, so people who are watching at home, that is a huge, huge savings to the school department. And, you know, as much as I, you know, may have had some disagreements with the former superintendent over his financing, his goal and zeal to work with Assistant Superintendent Durkin and Ms. McChrystal to bring that to fruition after many, many years of trying, you know, is an outstanding thing. We have it is a great savings to this district.
Any further discussion? All right. Next.
Okay, I'm sorry. The next item is backlogs of retirement applications, MTRS deduction reports, and service buybacks. When I started this position, there were many voicemail messages, and some of them were soon-to-be retirees, and they were complaining about their retirement applications. We came together as a department, and we we were very aggressive with addressing the retirement issue, so we didn't hold anyone up. We have succeeded with making sure that all of them are finished, they're done. However, we still have a big backlog with MTRS deductions reporting. With the MTRS deduction report, MTRS runs an exception report, an error report for anything that does not match up. So if there's a new hire or a termination or maternity leaves, family medical, FMLAs, those would show up on the report. We are as far back as March, and there are over 1,000 exceptions. So we're, as I said, we're working with MTRS and my staff to reduce that, because if a retiree goes to the MTRS, they may not be able to retire because of a holdup in my office. So we've been actively trying to reduce that number. And the same thing goes with the service buyback backlog. Okay. The next item on my list is bad bills. Last year, some purchase orders were canceled despite outstanding invoices. Some of these bills have now been paid using this year's funds, and others were held due to no money in an account and still waiting to be paid. This totals $153,000 in your general fund, and that we know of this, yes, exactly. These are the ones we know about right now, but I want to make sure that I distinguish between the impact to the general fund and the revolving fund. There's $153,000 that we have identified in bills that are impacting the general fund. The important thing is there are some bills that are paid, but they're hit in revolving funds. So even though they don't impact our overall net surplus or deficit, they have depleted the revolving accounts. So there's $1.4 million in the Aramark bills that you already knew about that were held back 3 months' worth of bills. So overall, Exhibit 2 is showing you a running summary of these bills. Any questions? Okay. The next.
Mr. Nutter?
Okay.
I just, again, Mr. Mayor, and I know you're probably going to tell me to calm down here, but I was annoyed to hear counselors tried to make the same comment that Mr. Hoey made earlier. Okay, it's real easy to say we have a surplus when we have $153,000 in unpaid bills. If they had paid the bills, we'd still have a deficit, because I believe the auditor report showed we only had about $90,000 that they said. There was no surplus in the school department. The school department has negative numbers. It says right here, we didn't pay $153,000. And for any city councilor last week to try to defend was repulsive to me. It showed that they had no clue of what they were talking about. And I was very disappointed to hear that. This is outrageous that $153,000 on an already tight budget, we now have to pay. You know, everyone was looking forward. We were going to get an extra million, 1.1 million, when that budget came out, final budget came out. And since then, we keep hearing we have a deficit here, we have a problem here, we have a problem here. It's ridiculous. So I just wanted to stress, there was no surplus. There was when they closed the books because they didn't pay bills.
Mr. Hoy?
He might be right. He knows a lot about the budget. But the $1,431,206, to me, I would put that on the back of Amarak. I wouldn't be Amarak or Amarak. I didn't vote for that contract, and I'm glad I didn't. I think that's their issue. We should have them sitting in front of us, their people, and let's see what they say about that number right there. I believe you'll find out that they made some mistakes for us, too. So.
If I may, through you to the Assistant Superintendent, my understanding is all of the bills get paid through the business office. Aramark has nothing to do with the billing, correct?
Correct. They bill on their end, and then they would want the money, so they would submit the bill to us.
Right,
And
it is the city. It is the school department
That pays the
that
bill.
pays the bill. It is not Aramark. I've seen people try to push this on Aramark before. This is not an Aramark issue. We're part of the CEP program, something that, you know, I pushed before I even got elected, and thanks to Kim Scott being so annoyed, she went to the superintendent when he first got here and said, can we get into this program or not? We get a great reimbursement because we're part of the CEP program and that we're able to feed our kids. And so, you know, to be clear, this is not an Aramark issue.
Ms. Doherty?
I'd just like to point out that the food program went on for those 3 months, that the bills weren't paid, correct?
That's correct.
And we are in the CEP program, so we are getting reimbursed for the money that's being spent to feed our children. But we did not pay those bills. Am I understanding that correctly? We did not
Yes.
pay those bills
We did
in the
pay.
year that the food was distributed.
Okay. So just to answer that one, it's a revolving account, so it doesn't matter what year it's hitting. What does matter is that and again, I'm new, so I'm talking on what I've gained from talking to staff. The bills were, we didn't have money in the revolving account. The revolving account had a healthy balance 3 years ago, and it went down drastically over the last couple of years. So it only had 33 cents, I think, in June. So they had to hold the bills because there was no money in the revolving account. If you think of the revolving account as you have a checking account and then you have savings accounts, the savings account, it's not your main account. So the revolving account's not the main account. They had to wait until there were funds in there to pay that because we offset the food service budget so much that there are no longer any funds.
Could I just follow up with that? So that money that was taken out of the revolving account and spent on other things, that's the money we now owe to repay the state, right? It's
Yes.
2.4 million? What was the amount?
An estimated 2 million, and that's still in question because we're working with the Department of Ed, but it's approximately 2 million based upon the formulas they have given. If we run the math, our spreadsheets show that we'll owe 2 million back to the food service fund. And the way we think they're going to allow us to pay that back is by reducing the amount of offsets that we do each year. So instead of us having to take it from the general fund and impacting the students directly, we're going to reduce what we charge against the food service fund, which does impact our budget and still because we have less to offset. So in summary with that, when we were talking about general fund versus revolving fund, the city would never see we wouldn't show a deficit because, one, the city does a really good job of, if an account has $10,000 and I try to charge $10,500, they're not going to let it go through. So the only way to overspend is by charging all your revolving accounts and depleting them. So we don't have an issue with overspending general funds. We have a problem with overspending by using our revolving accounts.
Well, except for the $153,000 that has to come out of the general fund.
Right.
That's money we overspent that we don't have. So that's a combination.
Ms. Nutter?
Just to be clear, the money was not overspent. It just wasn't paid.
So you have a bill you can't pay. That's what, I get that. Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately, we will have to pay these items, though, because they are technology. One of them was a technology subscription, and I believe, and I'm using numbers, $77,000, it's on there, $77,000 for a PJ system / Blackboards. That was paid this year using last year's funds, so now we're going to have to find money to pay for this year's subscription because we used it. But anyway, so that's the bad bill update. The next update is due to drastic budget reductions in certain line items, we don't have sufficient funds to pay normal operating bills. Telephone, as I mentioned when the first day I started, the telephone account had an E-rate offset that we're not allowed to do. So I mentioned that the first day. Now I'm here to say that we don't have any money in our telephone account. It's in the negative, so we don't have money to pay the telephone bill. It was in the negative in August. That was the E-rate issue. I did speak to Connor Baldwin, the CFO, again, to make sure that I understood what happened. He explained that the previous city manager, the city treasurer, and the CFO met with the previous administrators at the school department and made sure it was very clear how to handle the E-rate funds, because we had to comply with the Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53, and that they emphasized this. And to summarize, what it states is that you have to budget for your full telephone cost or your full E-rate cost. You put that in. When we get reimbursed, it flows through the city, and they have to, it goes into their free cash. They have to vote to give us a supplemental appropriation, but we would get those funds the following year anyhow. So they met with the previous administrators and explained that, and unfortunately, we don't have it in the budget now, so this is an issue right now.
Mr. Hoy?
Yes, if I'm correct, and I believe I am, your E-rate problem has been a problem for years. It's always a problem. And it's, I'm not sure, I'm not going to spit out a name who runs that, but I think that has to be looked at. It's the same person year after year that causes this problem. So we've had a problem with E-rate for quite a while. It's not new.
Ms. Doherty?
If I'm understanding, please clarify if I'm wrong, getting the E-rate reimbursement might be a problem because we have to fight for the resources all the time with the city. But having the money to pay for our phone bill is a separate issue, right? That's what was explained to our former CFO, what was explained to you. You have to budget to pay your phone bills, and then you can get, the city approves to give you the money afterwards when they get the funding. So they're two separate things. But right now, we don't have money to pay for our phones.
Right, so I don't disagree with either. If there was an issue with getting the E-rate funds, that's probably true. However, even when you had to fight to get the E-rate funds, we had a budget of $190,000 in that account, and it is now 20. So 2 years ago, there was a budget of 190. So even when we were hitting that we would get reimbursed later, maybe there were issues with that. But right now, it was cut from $190,000 to $20,000, so we're already in the hole in August.
If I could, Ms.
Ms. Martin, then Mr. Hoy.
Thank you. So in our previous fiscal year then, when we had $50,000, we had gone from 190 3 years ago to 2 years ago, then they brought it down to $50,000 last year, and then this year it was brought down again to $20,000. At what point did that 50,000 did we run out, and that the auditor would have shut off the ability to pay that bill?
I looked at the accounts because whenever I look at a budget, I look at the actuals as well to see maybe, to try to understand. I don't have any documentation from the previous administrators, so I'm not sure all the methodologies used. I'm not sure how they came up with numbers. There's no documentation, no paper trail. So I try to look at the Munis system to see. The reason last year, so the previous year they had 190, so that would cover the E-rate cost. Last year, when they cut the budget in half, we still were able to get away with it because they were still getting credits from the E-rate credits were hitting the bills. So one of the bills was, one of the first bills in the Munis system was a credit from Verizon of $134,000, so it offset it. This is the first time they cut the budget down to $20,000 without any credits any longer. Like, does that make sense? Last year we were able to get away with the cut budget because there were credits in the system.
And those came in over time?
No, the credit was from the previous year.
So it was a one-time credit that came in early in the fiscal year, so that it kind of backfilled that budget line, so we had the money there. And this year, because we didn't have the same performance and we don't have the money in there to begin with, we've run out now, as you say, in August. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that distinction.
Hoy.
Yes, Mayor. Earlier, or I've seen it in the Low Sun, I guess. One of my colleagues brought it up earlier, that the superintendent has answered up and he's going to come respond to us? Can anybody clarify that for me?
No, I mean, that decision hasn't been made yet. He has
Because
a choice of an open session
hasn't.
or an executive
But there was
session.
something in the Lowell Sun, and I'm just curious why we don't hear it first, you know? Didn't you say something to me earlier, Andy? Something in the paper about the super? And I'm just curious how Lowell Sun's got that and we haven't heard anything, but I can't wait to hear him respond to a lot of this stuff, so. I didn't know if that was true or not, and if it is, I want to find out if the city solicitor heard anything, or if you did, or, because
We're waiting.
You were still waiting? Thank you.
The issue was supposed to be that we're just waiting.
Thank you.
period. That's why you received when it'll actually take place.
I'm just curious if anybody's heard anything at all, because if you or the city solicitor has heard from his side,
No.
I think we
talked-
should.
But the issue that you're asking, when will it be an open hearing or a closed hearing? That's the superintendent's choice, and when it will be, that's his, we're
Was it-
negotiating with him for that.
Mayor, all due respect, as a school committee person, if you or the city solicitor has heard anything from that
But no,
side,
that's the point that I'm trying to make, is when we get that information, you'll get it right away.
so you haven't heard anything from
No,
his
not-
side at all?
No, they've been negotiating with that side, but a decision has not been made by that side as to whether he wants an executive session or an open session.
Okay.
And the timing of it. That's been negotiated. Okay.
But any contact with them at all, Mayor, if you're the
Yes.
one, you
No,
have it?
not myself,
I
no.
believe we all should be hearing it at the same time, that's all. Thank you.
But the question is, you'll get the information when we hear it.
Okay.
That's Mary Jo.
Okay. The next report is on the photo, again, an account that was reduced. The budget was reduced, so it has affected our photocopier purchase and lease accounts. There are two accounts. The photocopier purchase account has historically, we've made an investment into this account historically so that we can get new machines. When you buy a new machine, you get 3 years of free copies and free service. So if we made the same amount of purchases each year, you're constantly having the high-volume schools get the free machine, and then the ones that are on lease and you pay per copy can move to the low-volume schools. The account, the purchase account, the copier purchase account was underfunded, so we can't continue the annual investment. It's down to $50,000. It was $185 a year until last year it was cut, and then this year it's down to $52,000. But if you cut your purchase account and decide that you're no longer going to do your annual investments, then you need to offset that with an increase to your maintenance account, because now you have to pay per copy. Well, that account was cut down from 185 to 70 to 25. $25,000 in a service agreement account, that's not enough to cover one of our vendors for copiers. So we have 150 copy machines across the district. If you look at the actuals, like I said, I have no way of verifying. I have no idea where the numbers came from, so I would love to know their answers as well. But I don't have documentation. There's no electronic copies of anything, and there's no paper copies. So I look into Munis. When you look in Munis, the actuals for last year for the purchase agreements were $45,000. So I don't understand how we went down to 25 when we needed more, now that we're not making the purchases that would give us the free service.
Mr. Nutter?
It was put into the budget. The reasoning at the time when we were presented the budget was that the district is phasing out the Canon copiers and replacing them with Ricoh machines with less warranty expense. Have we done that or not done that?
So this is exactly why I did I had to research, because a fellow, a colleague made a comment about that recently and said that was why. And I'm getting a lot of calls from the schools upset about not having Canon plans. So we've had to say, hold off, we have to figure it out. Even if you take the Canons out of the picture and go with that plan, even if you do that, The RICO is the one that costs $44,000, not the Canon portion. If I add the Canon portion, they were going to double their service agreement, so it was going to go up to $40,000 instead of $20,000. But even if you take the Canons out, even if that were true, there's not enough for the RICO side of things. Because again, it was $45,000 just for RICO, and if you don't have the ongoing purchases from RICO, you have to increase those machine service agreement. So the point about that is that we don't have enough, and we have to come up with a service plan, because many of the schools what they've done is they've already had to call for services, and so we will get invoiced if we don't have agreements. So we have to implement an agreement. But just so you know, I have met with one of the vendors, but I did seek other quotes to make sure that we do have a full picture of how we can handle this. And the last item that I wanted to share was a budget review summary. I know that the budget has taken a little longer than what we had hoped for. That's because we keep encountering one thing after another. And again, the timing may be limited because there's no electronic copies of, there's no backup documentation. Every cell in a budget of this, this is a $165 million budget. So each of those cells, they're not just a number. It comes with a lot of backup documentation. Because I don't have that backup documentation, again, not in electronic form or paper form, I have to try to rebuild a budget. And I don't want to assume that the previous people were wrong, because so even when I build something and it differs from what the book says, I make sure I research so we are thorough and we don't have any issues. So I did a summary page so that you are at least kept up to date with where we stand. The summary page shows, it's the Exhibit 6 in your packet, and it shows each page of the budget. What it's going to show is the approved budget, but there's two key things to know with this budget process. We have some accounts that are understated, the costs were understated. So let's say special ed tuition and circuit breaker. That's going to be in the adjustment column because we need to increase the budget amount. The other issue is that we have the budget may have been approved for the right amount, but they put, let's say if you had $100 and they would say $80 general fund, $20 for offsets. Well, if the $20 offset is not available or allowed, that means the general fund now has to take that. So the way I tried to create that budget summary for you is to list each page so that you would know where we stand with each of those pages. You'll see whether it's no changes necessary, in progress, that type of information. And then I'm going to keep a running total of where we need to change the funding source or adjust because of more, like I said, more need. And then at the end of it all, I will show a total of what the budget needs to fund, what we have, and where we have shortage, what the total shortage is. I also added the final exhibit that shows a budget review is Exhibit 7. And what it is a task summary, because unfortunately, when I'm giving you timelines and saying, oh, I think I can look at this within X amount of time, it's because I'm assuming that there's documentation that can show me the numbers, the calculations, the rationale, the methodologies used. I don't have any of that. So the task summary shows everything that we have done to date, and it shows that in the 4 weeks that I've been here, we've gone through the food service investigation and review and trying to identify all of the offsets and what was allowed and not allowed, the union meetings, and the the step increase and lack of maintained databases. All of these things, even though it's taken time away from the budget review, it directly impacts the budget review. Because without a database with updated salaries, I can't tell you whether there's sufficient funds in the salary lines, et cetera, et cetera. So I listed all of that on the task summary so that you could see where we stood, what we've done and where we plan on going within the next couple of weeks.
Mr. Nutter?
I know it's a tough question for you, but, do you have any idea, even a rough guess, when you think you'd be able to present us with a final
So the ambitious part of me would love to sit here and say, I think I'm going to wrap it up, but the issue that I face is that my position is actually one that is very busy at this time of the year to begin with, on top of the fact that it's not as though I'm building a budget. If it takes 4 months to build a budget, I'm trying to, it's more or less like we're doing a forensic audit on our own. I have to research each line because I don't know who would have the answers. So I don't have access to the previous administrator, so I'm not sure where these numbers came up. When you see a $12 million special ed tuition, when they spent $12 million and you see it cut down to $11 million, I don't even know how to begin to understand that. So I can say ambitiously that I'm hoping within the next 2 weeks, but if we have one, it's like peeling the onion.
Yeah.
Every day I go in and I can face another. That's why I just want to say respectfully that we understand how urgent this is. We understand this is impacting decisions, and we're doing everything we can to finish.
Madam Superintendent?
Thank you. And that's why I had asked, not that she wasn't busy enough, but I wanted Billy Joe to share with you the Exhibit 6 and 7 so that you could see where she was at, the adjustments that are going to need to be made to each of the budget pages. And then additionally, everything that her and her department has investigated thus. So when they go to, put the step increases in and get that ready, then it's like 10 paces back. So we appreciate your patience with this, but we also want to make sure we're providing you with accurate information. So it does take an extensive amount of work. So until such time that the budget is actually handed to you in package, we will continue to update, especially those Exhibits 6 and 7, so that you can see how things are playing out and be able to ask those particular questions relative to the budget pages.
Mr. Nutter, then Ms. Martin.
Through you to the superintendent, are we, because we don't know where we are money-wise, are we not filling positions? As you well know, there are still a lot of unhappy people, and it was with great reluctance that myself and Ms. Martin voted to approve that administrator position last week, and now I'm being told there's a new administrative position that's been posted for a data system-wide administrator. Are we?
That is a position that the person has left the district. They left last Friday. The position is a position that is required by the state. We need to have that position to do all of our state mandated reporting, EPIM, SIMS, all of that. That person does all of that data. We are in a real tight crunch at this point with this person leaving, because our next round of data submissions is October 1 for the October 25th deadline. We had extensive discussions today and yesterday as a leadership team to determine if there was, we've actually taken some of that person's task because it was a combined job that was added and redistributed to a number of people in our administrative team. And so it is really challenging to not go forward with this position because we don't have the staff with the skill set. So to be able to do all of this data sorting, the only other thing that we could look at is an hourly rate to pay someone, but that can be a little bit challenging unless we know that someone has the distinct ability to be able to do this work. And we've actually investigated some of those costs, and we're not certain that by the end of it, we wouldn't be at that salary range that we need. So we have discussed holding on other positions. You know, the HR position is closed today. I haven't had an opportunity to look at those that applied there, and the coordinator position is posted, but, you know, but we do have challenges in our district, as you're well aware, and we do need those options for our students.
Well, I know the position was funded. It was in the budget. And I wasn't aware until a few minutes ago that the person just left us. So I know the state has requirements that we have to submit, so thank you.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much.
Mr. Hoyt and Ms. Delay.
Just two quick questions. One would be, so will you anticipate getting something maybe the second week in October, the second meeting in October? At that point, will we be able to get a document that shows what was initially budgeted and then the kind of variance and then the new budget? So I just want to make sure we're going to have the ability to look back at what was initially submitted as well as forward to see what is now the actual, I don't want to say actual, but what is now the projected budget.
Absolutely. I've been thinking of this as I go along. How do I present such a complicated topic to you where it's still understandable? When you have too much information, sometimes it actually seems like less. So what I was thinking is to take the existing budget, just for those that like to pay attention to the details, I could add another column with the adjustment. Or we could do that. But since there's so much information, I could hide the previous years so that, just so that you can see what was approved this year, what we need to adjust, so that you can see it side by side. Another option would be to take the existing budget, redo it with the same format, but redo it, and then you have two budgets in front of you. So we'll figure that one out so that you can have two different, you'll have different options. And most importantly, I'll do it in a summary format so that it makes sense, so that you can see, like I said, with the Exhibit 6, you're seeing it page by page. So if I make a change, you'll see that this page, we only adjusted the funding source. This page, we had to actually increase special ed tuition or transportation. You'll see where those changes are made.
And I think the use of notes, that track along the bottom are incredibly helpful. So, I mean, that's a great way to do it. Okay. Then my next question would be, at that point, will we be basically looking at other recommendations in terms of savings? Because, I mean, there are still, I think, opportunities for whether it's positions or other areas that we're going to need to look at in these next 2 to 4 weeks. Will that be part of this presentation that comes back to us that second meeting in October?
As I'm going through the process, it allows me to learn, I mean, obviously, we don't want to make any cuts, but if we have to, I am keeping a running list of, because there's some areas you just cannot cut. And then there are other areas that we're keeping a list.
Okay. And the third part of that is also that there are some that I know we've talked about this before, without supplanting, but are there opportunities within the grant funds to absorb some positions or portions of positions without supplanting, clearly, but, the kind of the third option of the ways that we can really pare down our spending?
They've already been, so when the budget allocations were developed, they were already in there, so they've already been offset. So on your budget, when you have an approved, like if you have 5 science teachers, if 3 were going to be funded by the grants, they were already listed in that offset line. And we did not get any increased allocations, so unfortunately, no.
But couldn't there be an opportunity for other expenses within that grant that we may be able to pare down so that instead of 3 science teachers, you've got 4 going against the grant, 1 going against the general budget?
We'll look into it to see if we can do it without supplanting.
And that's my only question. And I know that grants are incredibly prescriptive and that there are many times we don't have that flexibility, but within it, there may be some opportunities where we can file amendments and be able to, I mean, if we're saving 1 or 2 positions, that's
absolutely,
that's going to make a big difference. Thank you.
Mr. Hoy?
The person that we lost, I believe he was being paid by Title I funds, right?
The data analyst?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I
I'm
don't
wondering,
think so.
I know that you're not giving up the name, but I think it's he's either paid by Title I. If it's the same person, I think we just moved him from the 4th floor up to the 5th, maybe? Is that the guy that left? No? Okay, I'm just curious, because you're talking about we lost a data person? I thought that was someone who used to be on the 4th floor that's up on the 5th floor now.
No, he's been on the 4th floor, and he remains on the 4th floor.
Okay.
So it's a different person that
All
you're
right,
talking about.
thank you.
You're welcome.
It is I looked it up today, it is in the general fund.
Okay. Well, speaking of, Mr. Lay,
Yes, very similar question, actually. I just want to clarify, what position was that was posted and that he left?
It's a data, thank you.
The position is the database system-wide administrator, so this position actually manages all of our student and staff databases. And all of the required state reports, SIMS, EPUMs, all of those reports are managed, uploaded to the state through this individual. It's our source of funding. If we don't report to the state our student numbers and our staffing numbers, we would not qualify for our funding. So this is an incredibly important position. This position also manages any new staff coming in, making sure that they're in the database, making sure that they have access to the database and their records, all of our student record access for our students, creating accounts. This position does manage all of our databases.
Thank you.
you all set? Mr. Nutter?
That position, it was explained in the budget, was actually combined. It was a enterprise engineer position and a student database administrator position, and they combined it to make just one position.
You all set? Thank you. All right, next, Madam Superintendent, report card update.
Yes, this was in response to a motion that was brought on the floor. I'd ask, with your permission, Assistant Superintendent Desmond to provide you an update.
Thank you. So this is an informational update along with an update on Ms. Doherty's motion regarding looking at our middle school report card and moving towards a standard-based report card. So I just want to preface this with, last year and the year prior, we heard a lot of feedback from our elementary teachers with regards to their concern around, after moving to the Common Core standard and changing some of our curriculum programming, that the elementary report cards were not, the language was not necessarily aligned to how they were grading and assessing. So the elementary report card report here, or update, really outlines how we approached bringing teams of teachers together to look at the report card and address concerns, try to streamline language, try to incorporate science standards to be assessed by teachers, since we made a huge commitment to bringing in FOSS kits to really focus our science instruction. So this work was going on before Ms. Doherty brought forward the motion that was from 2016 around middle school. So that is why we were not able to tackle the middle school work last year, because there was so much going on with elementary report card realignment. And in order to do it well, we really needed to stay the course and finish that work and take on the middle school report card for this year. So that is underway now. We have a survey created that will go out to our middle school teachers to get some feedback, and that's the second report as to how we would like to move forward with the middle school report card. So the elementary report card will be the report card that will go home with the students in December at our first elementary school report card distribution. And again, the language was aligned, and we were able to add science standards. And that was all based on extensive work with teacher focus groups. So I don't know if there's any questions.
Ms. Doherty? No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will we be able to see this report card before December?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
Now, Ms. Doherty.
That's actually, that was where I was thinking we should have a curriculum subcommittee meeting. We used to have curriculum subcommittee meetings regularly, and I think it would be a great opportunity to do a little deeper dive into this. I have to say, I was very impressed with this report. I love the inclusive way that each school had a representative, that teachers got to voice their concerns. I know it was a big shift when we originally went to the standards-based elementary report card. I was on the committee at that time. And then it makes sense that you'd have to update it when we change the Common Core curriculum. So I love the whole process and methodology of approaching this. And I would, as my colleague says, I would love to see, what the final result was, and especially then looking to align with the state. What are the expectations from the state so that we're all on the same page? And one issue that would be of real interest to me that I believe I'm still on the curriculum subcommittee, is to look at how we're going to roll it out with our parents and families so that parents can look at this document and understand, where their child falls on this line of, you're at this age or in this grade, you should know this, your number sense should be this, your reading level should be whatever. I think that's a critical piece for our families, especially where many of our families are not native English speakers, to really look at that we very clearly communicate to our families what these report cards represent. And so then the second piece, again, is I look forward to, seeing what you come up with for the middle school. I know it's got its own set of challenges, but thank you for this report and for doing this very important work.
Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd say too, adding my thanks for getting the information. So as we're looking at moving forward with a grade 5 pilot, would we anticipate then that process will take us through this year and we'll be able to hopefully implement for next year? Okay, and then it'll be allowed, then we could kind of build on that from there.
And one of the other major reasons for really looking at grade 5 is because we now have included grade 5 into some of our elementary schools. So it makes sense to have the standards-based report card K to 5 in those schools and follow that same structure. So our goal would be providing, or depending upon what we get for feedback and all of that, our goal would be to try to focus on a standards-based report card for grade 5, and then hopefully continue this work annually until we roll up to where we need to be.
Excellent, that's great, thank you.
Mr. Cotto? You had your hand, you all set?
I'm not Mr. Nutter, but it's okay. To follow up what Ms. Doherty asked about, is information about the report card and how to read this information going out to the parents before December?
Yes.
Okay.
And it would be in multiple languages.
Great.
So, and hopefully we would encourage schools to do some, parent nights where they spoke about the report card, hopefully at open house and things like that. The issue with developing or changing existing language in the report card is it's a multi-layered process, right? So you have to bring in the voice of teachers who are working with kids. You have to look at standards. You have to come to consensus. But then it has to fit the constraints of character size for our database where we generate our report cards. And we have to make sure that Aspen or Follett, who runs our student database or who is the company that oversees it, can manage the data that we're putting in there to have an output for the report card. So we have to sometimes go back to the drawing board because some things have to be truncated, and we don't want to lose the value of the line based on the truncation. So right now, we're in the process of making sure that all of the language that's been truncated by our database system still honors the work that we've done, and then from there, we will translate and then move to notifying parents and working our way towards the December report card date, if that makes sense.
Just to follow up on that, though, Ms. Desmond, is the report card going to be electronically available also? Or is it just going to be a hard copy available for the parents? And will the school be able to keep an electronic version of that report card?
Yeah, so the report card is all built out through Aspen, our online database system. So at any time, the school could replicate the report card, but it is not in a format that parents can log on electronically and see it. But it is in a format that it can be generated or regenerated at any parental request at the school level.
Is that a consideration, perhaps, down the road, to have it electronically available that parents could go on?
Yeah, we could
online?
certainly look at that.
We all know how children like to share their report cards when they go home.
We can certainly look at that. We were trying to stay within the same format as we've had in the past and just connect the language so that it was related to the Common Core changes and our curriculum changes over time, because we haven't updated the report card since, for many years, and so that's why we undertook that based on teacher requests. Our staff was looking to make these changes, but that's definitely something we can look at for the future.
That's great, and I can tell you, I was part of the team that worked at the Bailey School and come up with a new report card back then, and that was a long time ago, very long time ago, probably like 92, somewhere in there, somewhere. Yeah, it was a great report card. I think, Mr. McCosker, you probably remember that whole time. I guess we were all there together. But I'm glad that this is a monumental task. It really is, just to develop that new tool. That's great. Thank you.
Ms. Martin?
In addition, because I do think one of the, communicating to parents and families so that they really can get the most information out of this as possible, I do think it's a challenge, because this is not your typical, making most of our families should be used to the standards base at the elementary level already, but certainly moving into the middle school, it will become a concern, and looking at the significant changes that will be necessary based on the Common Core shift. The idea of being able to kind of create our own instructional, whether it's kind of a webinar format or something like that, something that could be available that a parent could click from their phone and have someone walk them through what these things mean. I know you try very hard. These are not intuitive documents. They are, it's very difficult to really, I think, get what our families need to get from them, and the more we can do to really describe it well and give them the tools they need to use it effectively, offering it in separate languages, being able to kind of, if they're going to a presentation at school to learn about it, to have that backup of, you went to a presentation, now you can watch it anytime you want, to kind of, with the report card in front of you. I think that could be really helpful.
All set. Thank you. Next, citywide family council bylaws.
Yes, this is just for your informational purposes. With the assistance of a task force from the Lowell Public Schools, Project Learn, and Working Cities, we are going to be launching and you have that invite in your packet. You also received a copy of it last week. The Your Voice Matters, the launching of the Citywide Family Council on September 26th. The team also revisited the bylaws for the council, and the major shift, you have the existing bylaws and the Citywide Family Council bylaws that are being proposed. The major shift is a much more inclusive title of family, because many of our families are very diverse. So we don't only have, parents, we have grandparents, aunts, uncles, guardians, and we want to embrace all of the members and encourage them to partake in the Citywide Family Council. So that's just for your information.
Story.
Yes, I think this is going to be a great thing. I don't have all the information in front of me, but I did call John McDonough's City Life show tonight to keep advertising this thing.
Great.
On the 26th. And I know Ms. Doherty's going to say something, because I seen her on City Life the other day. But they're saying Dominic's going to show up before me because they're giving out 50 backpacks. I'm going to show up after they give out the 50 backpacks, just so you know. I'm not going there for a backpack. But they are giving the first 50 children in the door backpacks, so if anybody's out there, it's on the 26th, and I think Ms. Doherty might help me out with the time.
5:30 to 7:30, and dinner will be served.
Yes.
There's also babysitting services if you need it, or translation services.
All right, thank you. That's right, thank you very much.
All right, enough, okay. Any further discussion on this matter, Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Your Honor. If I could, through you to the superintendent, I would just make this in the form of a suggestion or recommendation. I know you've got a lot on your plate already, but my first introduction to the Lowell Public Schools was as a member of the Citywide Parent Council, and it was monthly meetings that the leadership had with Superintendent George Sapasaris. He made time for us once a month. And I think it was huge. First, as a parent, my son was in kindergarten at the time. I was on the leadership team. Obviously, it was not the whole Citywide Parent Council who met with the superintendent, but to know that we had his ear and that he felt our input was important was huge for me individually as a newcomer to the Lowell Public Schools, but also as someone going out in the community and talking to other families and other parents and saying, this is an organization that really matters. And all the studies show the more your families are involved in the children's education, the more successful those children are going to be. And I believe that the growth and the empowerment of this organization will start from the top. It starts from this committee, it starts from you and your leadership with your principals out in the schools to, again, recognize the important role that families play and let them know their input is welcomed. And I would just love that if you could try to do some of that, what Superintendent Sapasaris did. Thank you.
Madam Superintendent?
That is the plan. So if I cannot be there, there will be a member of the team there to hear the voice of our families and provide information that might be requested. So that is the plan.
Great.
All right, next, report on motions.
Yes, thank you. This is your regular report on motions for your review. Just a point of reference on page 2, item number 6. Mr. Lay, you had requested the MTEL workshops be placed back on the agenda. We did do some investigating on that, and there was documentation that it was presented previously, but we put it back on so that we can explore the feasibility of having other people take the course.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, enrollment figures.
Yes, this is your regular enrollment figures, Lowell Public Schools.
Okay, I need a motion to accept the reports of the superintendent on 9.1 through 9.8 as report of progress. Motion to do that. Ms. Martin, second by Mr. Nutter. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Next, home education, Madam Superintendent.
This is a request for home education for two families.
I need a motion to approve by Mr. Hoey, second by Mr. Dakota. Roll call.
Ms. Martin? Yes. Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
All right, under new business policy revision, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you. This was a motion brought forward by the mayor and Mr. Nutter, requesting that the committee members follow the established policy of setting up a visit to a school by contacting the principal in advance to set up a time, day, and then notify the superintendent of the planned visit, and request the school committee to expand that policy to include meetings with department heads, administrators, and all central office personnel. We have the policy attached, and we are recommending the language. This same process applies to meetings with department heads, administrators, and all central office personnel. So that's for your consideration and your vote.
All right, need a motion to approve by Mr. Nutter, second by Mr. Dakota. Roll call.
Ms. Martin? Yes. Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
All right, next is the appointment to the Crest Board. Madam Superintendent, do you want to?
Yes, annually, the Lowell School Committee is required by statute to elect a representative by school committee approval to serve on the local Special Education Collaborative Board of Directors, which is the collaborative for regional educational services and training, CREST in Methuen. Besides the superintendent of schools, school committee members are the only eligible participants to be elected to serve on the local educational collaborative board, and a vote of the school committee is required to appoint the CREST Advisory Board representative. I am requesting a motion to recommend and approve a school committee representative to the board, or
The superintendent?
another recommendation.
Okay, Madam?
If I could make a motion to recommend the appointment of Acting Superintendent Durkin as our representative
Yeah,
to the
second.
Crest Board.
A second to that? Mr. Nutter? Roll call?
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Okay, vote to accept the donation of the Lowell Community Charter School. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, we'd ask the committee to accept a donation of 53 desks for, between two schools, and they were, the Wang and the Butler would be the recipients.
Motion to accept by Mr. Hoey, second by Mr. Dakota.
Excuse me, Mayor,
Yes,
can
you
I
wanna
just
speak on that?
mention one thing on that? I'd just like to thank a fellow colleague of mine, Bob Gignac, for that donation. He's working over at the new charter school on Jackson Street, so if he's watching, keep sending us stuff, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so, but you stand by making the motion to accept, and Mr. Dakota, okay, thank you.
You need a roll call.
You need a roll call?
Ms. Martin? Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras? Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Next, 10.5, we have approval of research requests by Lowell school staff. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, there are 3 members of our staff who are part of the University of Massachusetts Lowell practitioner-based doctoral program, and these are their requests for their research.
Need a motion to accept that? Mr. Dakota, second by Mr. Hoey. Roll call?
Ms. Martin? Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
All right, next we have 3 convention requests. I need a motion to accept by Ms. Martin, second by Mr. Dakota. Roll call?
Ms. Martin? Mr. Nutter?
Yes.
Mayor Samaras?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mr. Lay? 7 yeas, approved.
Then we have the invitation to the Citywide Family Council kickoff event. Madam Superintendent, please.
Yes, I think both school committeeman Hoey and Ms. Doherty articulated it very well, and all are invited. We hope that we see a great turnout of our families, September 26th, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., Lowell Senior Center on Broadway Street.
All right, need a motion to accept and place on file by Mr. Dakota, second by Mr. Nutter. A motion to adjourn. Oops.
Before we do, I would just like to compliment the acting superintendent and her staff. We've had a series of unfortunate incidents, the fight downtown, the gun at the school, and I think the superintendent and her staff, working in conjunction with the Lowell Police Department, have done a fantastic job in dealing with these issues. And I hope that sometime in late October or maybe the November meeting, we invite the chief back to give us an update. But I know that they're working very hard. I think they have done an outstanding job.
They certainly,
with
yeah, we'll
this.
do that, though. Okay. Motion to adjourn. And Mr. Nutter, second by Mr. Dakota. Thank you.